Welcome to another episode of the Building Texas Show. I'm thrilled to have Lee Martin here. And Lee and I have worked together in the past, and we've had a number of long conversations about really deep topics. And today we're going to talk about AI, we're going to talk about learning. And really, between AI and learning, AI learns, but I want to have a conversation about the people, the kids. A lot of people are being introduced to AI, and I have concerns about that because you can weaponize it in so many ways. But you've taken your career into a really exciting path with AI, generative AI, and all those aspects that go into cybersecurity and learning and how we develop that curriculum and make it last. But I'm just thrilled to have you here at Das Greenhouse and talking about the work that you do.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me. It's been way too long since I've seen you, and I'm super happy to be part of this conversation.
And we worked together in the cybersecurity space 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. You're still in the cybersecurity space and working for a company called Cofense.
Yes. And
what's your role? What do you do at Cofense, and who is Cofense?
So, first of all, Cofense is the premier email security and security awareness training company globally. We have a whole separated portfolio of email phishing defense and response, along with a managed service that goes along with that to manage your post SEGs, which stands for Secure Email Gateway. So everything that gets through your SEG, which believe me is a lot.
Yeah.
We have a service that handles that. We've got over 77 analysts that all they do is human vetted threat intelligence. And then we have another side of our portfolio, which is what I'm in charge of, which is security awareness training. So it all started out with a phishing simulation engine called FishMe back in the day. And when the company was founded, it was called FishMe. We're now called Cofense. And in my section of the portfolio, I manage FishMe, our reporter button that allows you to report suspicious emails, our LMS, which is learning management system, and I'm also in charge of the development of all content development at Cofense. So that means all of the learning content from an email template that's based on a real threat, all the way to a comprehensive compliance e-learning module that could be, 30 minutes long, 45 minutes long.
So if you're working in corporate America,
mm-hmm.
there's a good chance that you've run into Cofense, FishMe, or training that's similar, because it is those emails that we're all on the lookout. They have a really exciting subject line, or hey, your CEO is asking you to send them money or something strange. Like, that's a phishing email from what I remember. But are you seeing them get more sophisticated? Like, how does that work in today's world?
Statistically, what you just said is definitely true. We've got records of over 35 million individual learners who've been conditioned against phishing. And your intro talking about AI, following on to your question here about are phishing attacks getting more sophisticated?
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how much. The days of the Nigerian prince asking for your bank account are long gone. Although you may still get that email, but nobody's going to fall for it anymore. Yeah. Last year, and let me rephrase that. Beyond phishing, and believe me, there are millions of phishing emails that are sent. A lot of them are sent from threat actors that English is not, let's say, their first language.
Yep.
Generative AI has provided them with a crutch to provide perfect English.
Oh, I didn't
perfectly
even think about
structured grammar. So a lot of the indicators of the phish that you would be looking for as a cyber threat analyst, gone. Now you have to look at something that's a little bit more vaporous, like context. Yeah. And you start to have to develop sort of a sensitivity about how you're interacting with technology, which unfortunately globally, the human workforce, if you look across the globe, is not really prepared. It's a small percentage of folks that have developed a level of sensitivity that they can come up against threats that we're really seeing. So are you familiar with the term deepfake?
No, I've heard deepfake in a number of contexts, but not in phishing emails.
So because we get more and more sophisticated at the perimeter defense level, so technology is really good at stopping, a malicious email that's got a really sketchy domain attached to it, that's got a malware installing .exe file. This is like a 2010, payload. your Palo Alto gateway is going to stop that stuff before it ever gets to your
Frontline
employees, right?
Yeah.
Where in the old days, you'd be like, your IT department's asking you to update your Windows immediately. Double click this attachment, and you've got a payload delivered. Now, oftentimes I'm not going to even send you anything malicious. There's going to be no indicator in my first reach out to you, especially if you're a valued target. So if I'm going to target somebody in your finance department because I want to engage in what's called business email compromise, I'm going to pretend to be somebody inside your company who gets you into an interaction. 1, 2, 3 emails. By the third email, you're not critically thinking at all. So when I talk about deepfake, we had an example of this that happened last year where it was a financial transaction fraud, it was a business email compromise, and the employee in the finance department of the affected company ended up on a Zoom call with 2 deepfakes. One was the chief revenue officer, one was the chief financial officer.
Who he or she would recognize.
Photorealistic, and they also had studied the idiom in which those people had spoken, and the CFO had been giving speeches around, so the AI had actually predicted what nouns this person would use, what adjectives they usually used to make sure that they were as right as possible, and ordered the person to break protocol for an emergent situation, and it ended up being like $2.5 million out the door, unrecoverable. So, malicious use of AIs has required people on the good side of this equation, which we like to think of ourselves as, to sort of meet that with good use of generative AI. So you might be
What's an example of good use? Because what you just described horrifies me.
Right. So I could look at 99.89s of AI generated content and look at it for less than a second and say, it's AI. And I put a regular person, when I say a regular person, just somebody who's not in this line of work,
doing this every
next
day.
to it, and they're like, no, that's a real human. And you find out, well, how can you train somebody to do this in a 40-second microlearning? You can't. It's a question of exposure and conditioning. When you have looked at a terabyte of AI-generated content, it starts to jump out at you in some ways, and it's shrinking every day. I don't expect that this is going to remain a thing, meaning this easy realization. Like the skin is too shiny. The lighting is just a little bit too perfect.
Well, that's my question. Like, what are you looking for when you can recognize them? What is it that
context?
Okay.
So I'm training what we're looking for, and this is something that goes beyond. I want to condition you against somebody who's trying to get you to interact with an email that's delivering a malicious payload. That's an actual pretty concise learning objective. At Cofense, what we do is we have this, like I said, this global threat network. We have 30 million people reporting suspicious emails that come to us.
Yep.
We synthesize that into training material, defang it, and send you an actual segments. So so this is an email that got past a seg. Inside FishMe, I can tell you exactly which secure email gateway it got past. Is that the one you're using? I'm going to train your employees on it.
Yep.
That's a little easier. These emergent threats require a little bit more immersive training. So what we end up doing is we put you in a position, and we actually built this last summer. We built a version of that exact deepfake threat where we put you on a fake Zoom call with 2 avatars. And at the end, we ask you which one was the human and which one wasn't. It's a trick question. They were both not human.
Yeah.
Because most people would say, no, one
of them
looked human. Yeah, it wasn't. And when I say trick, you're not trying to trick your learner population, but you're trying to get them to engage and think in another way.
You're just affirming the ignorance, and it's a harsh word, but I'm ignorant.
Well, that's where you have to start.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to learn if you think you already know. So the idea here is the context of the situation. If it's what we're going to end up with is, and you and I talked about this not long ago, is what I would call an epistemological crisis, where I cannot tell what is real and what is not. If that's the case, then and a lot of us that are more freer thinkers are going to find this stifling. But the need to follow corporate rules and governance are going to become even more and more important, so that if a threat actor asks you to step outside, even if it's a hyper-realistic, futuristic, 10 years from now, hologram of your CEO telling you to do this, you need to have a tertiary way to verify. Say, I totally understand what you're saying, Justin, that you're asking me to do. I'm going to text your phone, and I need you to text me back just to confirm. Or I need you to write me an email from your email address so I have a written record of this just to verify, because it's so outside of what we should normally be doing. And a lot of times, even the most sophisticated con will fall apart.
And in manufacturing, we did something similar with quality 30 years ago, where we really empowered everyone on the plant floor to stop the line. If a janitor saw something that was wrong, they could stop a $1 million production line. Why? Because it was going to cause long-term harm. Here, I think it's a similar model, but in an office setting, a corporate setting, even a family setting in some cases. I want to encourage the leaders to say it's okay to question me in this way. If you feel like it's out of context, if you feel like, hey, you need to validate, I would just encourage leaders to really be accepting of that.
Well, and it's a democratization of responsibility, meaning everybody that's an employee of any company that I was running is actually part of my my SOC, my Security Operations Center. You sort of like, I've made all this like Old West iconography. It's like, I want a posse. I want to deputize you to be part of the defense of the company, because while humans are the biggest assets of a company, they're also what can end up being a liability.
Yeah.
And there's a split right now in the way companies are looking at employees. Have you heard of HRM, or human risk management?
No, that's a new one to me.
So human risk management is something that's being overlaid on, and cybersecurity sort of fits into this, where we're going to, evaluate and provide all these data models and stuff around how we mitigate risk at the human level. Well, at one end of the spectrum, it feels like people are looking at employees and seeing them as a risk, not an asset.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's not what they really want to get to. It's really about understanding the risk that, Justin, in your role, with your exposure to the market or your exposure to media, what risks are going to hit you that the analyst who doesn't even have a social media presence, that doesn't, maybe even they work on the floor of the factory, they don't even have a corporate email address. What's their cybersecurity risk exposure?
Yeah.
Well, this human risk management goes into everything. It doesn't go into just cybersecurity. It goes into, financial protocols. It goes into, you name it, physical safety in a warehouse, So it extends to a lot of things, but it's trying to provide data at a level where you can look and say, I've got 30,000 employees. Where is most of my risk consolidated? So if you just sort of like did a Pareto analysis, where am I going to put the most of my effort?
Yeah.
It's overlapping where I have most of my risk. This is very interesting from a data standpoint. From an application standpoint, it's so easy without discipline to just demonize your employees.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to be really careful, judicious.
But that's what it feels like, right? Right. Even today, the phishing email, it feels like it's a gotcha. It feels like we're trying to go out and find the person that's going to be the weakest link. And I just have to remind I do not believe that that's the intent.
Well, we actually just are running a survey of all of our FishMe operators this week to sort of have everybody step up and say, what kind of program are you running?
Yeah.
Punitive or non-punitive, or prefer not to say.
Yeah.
And we're getting a pretty good list. And these skew, that's another thing about Cofense, we skew into the big enterprise space.
Yeah.
We don't have much penetration into the small business, like sub 5,000 employees. And
but a huge risk element for that subgroup because they're not investing in this. They don't know that this is a risk. I mean, $2.5 million leaving any company impacts everybody.
Yeah,
could be detrimental for
a big company. This is a big problem. For a small company, it could be existential.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the other thing too. And we can talk about this more as we talk about how we build content. When you're talking about something as simple as clicking on a link in an email or opening an attachment or engaging in a video call with an unknown party, that this is dangerous enough to you and your career that it could put everything in your life at risk. And that sounds preposterous. And yet when you look at consequentialism and you sort of follow the chain of events that happen that could end up with maybe your company goes out of business, maybe you lose your position and your ability to support your family. All of these things, this is not something to be taken lightly.
No.
And we sort of, well, it's just email. It's not like I'm crossing the road blindfolded right in front of where the garbage trucks come out and I'll just gonna roll the dice. So it's hard to, it's difficult for us to think about because we as very complex apes don't have an inner threat matrix. We know that angry looking dog is dangerous.
Yeah.
We don't intellectually have to think about, I wonder if he's eaten today. No, we look at him and he's giving you a signal. Whoa. I don't have to worry that a locomotive speeding right past me would smash me to bits. Like you sort of understand that danger.
Yeah.
This is a hidden danger that's difficult for folks to get. So when you said it feels like a gotcha, that's one of the things that we really struggle with because resentment is a horrible barrier to learning.
Yeah.
If I resent you and you're trying to teach me something, I've already thrown up a huge wall. I mean, if you've got kids that are trying to learn, if they're mad at you for the lesson you're trying to teach them, you're just going to need to cool it down and come back around, right? So what we've really tried to focus on is engagement. Mm-hmm. And that was the first place that we started using generative AI, is to find ways to engage people in a way to say, you clicked on that link, that's okay. This is the chance for us to deputize you.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to learn. And we want to build more and more sophisticated programs where, you're able to claw back by demonstrating competency. That, hey, I wasn't concentrating. My cube mate was bothering me and I didn't give this email sufficient thought, but I actually do know it.
Yeah.
Oh, is that because your functional manager is whip cracking everybody and therefore you're completely centrally overwhelmed and you're not able to make a good decision? So, I mean,
or you have something going on in life. There's so many inputs to the human employee that can cloud and shroud that judgment.
Yeah.
And the more we can educate, the more we can make it visible of what's good, what's bad, and what to kind of look out for. It's an incredibly important thing. You mentioned a word, and I always enjoy our conversations because I always learn a new word, but epistemology?
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Yeah, that is the right word.
I'm proud of myself for saying it.
It was my goal to get on this podcast. And after we talk about epistemology, we could talk about numenology and phenomenology and like all kinds of other fancy words. Just kidding. Epistema and logos are the two Greek roots of this. And it's really the philosophy behind understanding what we know, talking about how we know what we know.
Yeah.
And talking about knowledge, I think, would be the best way to say it in regular English vernacular. And so it can be tough. If you want to talk about it like if you went to Trinity or something in their philosophy department and wanted to talk to somebody in the philosophy department about epistemology, you're going to get into all of this kind of stuff about like, oh my goodness, how do you know that you even exist?
Yeah.
If you've heard about the simulation theory stuff you might run across on the internet where people say there's a mathematically compelling argument that we're in a simulation.
Yeah.
That's an epistemological argument, right? Because it's like, I have all of this sensory data that tells me that I exist and it tells me that I'm a thing, and you might listen to somebody like Sam Harris who says, that illusionary self that you think you're talking about is not real either. Ooh. Okay, fine. Well, you have all of these things that make it difficult to determine what is real.
Yeah.
In the world of AI, this gets out of the internal and into the external. So, oh my goodness, I actually
got it right.
No. I just realized I was making a joke about. So, it's out of the numerological, the internal, the soul level of the human being, and into the phenomenological, which is the natural world, which is where this is starting to show up. It's one thing if you can put yourself through some sort of mental gymnastics to be like, oh, I don't even know that I'm really looking at you here, and you start thinking about these things. It's another to be like, I'm trying to do my job, and I can't tell what's real or not.
Yeah.
Because we go back in time 60 years, and you're going to have a clinical psychiatrist who's saying that's schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when then that is writ large, the state of being of societies?
Yeah. It's a cultural problem.
Or a species problem?
Well
I don't
said.
mean to be Chicken Little, but I'm saying I don't think we've really grasped where this is going, because in the last 3 months we've gone from generative AI of very limited human-like avatars to we're working right now on a piece of content that is a podcast.
Yep.
Nothing is real in it.
Including the people that you're going to see
I'm
sitting in
saying
these.
photorealistic humans having a podcast-like dialogue based on learning objectives that we feed into an engine and refine. And
As a parent, that's horrifying. Well, that is technology. And like, I know 2 + 2 is going to equal 4 every time. I know how to go find that. I know how to route it. I know how to teach it. But what you just explained, you're in a whole different level of, is that really? How do I know? How do I verify? Like, what do I know?
So, I know we didn't expect this to be a philosophical conversation, but I think it leans itself to it a little bit.
I think it has to. I think people are really struggling with what AI has done, and in your point, in the last 90 days versus the last 3 years. I mean, AI wasn't accessible to people until Americans, until ChatGPT just made it overly accessible.
Right.
OpenAI is one form, but there's numerous engines out there doing this, and the general public doesn't know it.
So this is my hypothesis, and I'll apologize in advance if I trespass on anybody else who's articulated something like it. Right now, AI feels like a very good tool.
Yeah.
And this, I'm going to be speaking at Intellicon next week. What I'm going to be talking about is augmenting workflows for good with generative AI tools.
Taking basic blocking, tackling work and automating it.
To a degree, but also generating things that are unfeasible for you to do if you're not an astounding visual artist.
Okay.
So like if you're an astounding visual artist, you might be able to do this, but it still might take you a week. With the right prompts and the right workflow, sometimes some of that kind of stuff can be collapsed into minutes.
Yeah.
In theory. But what I was going to say to your question about this is scary for my kids.
Yeah.
Or is about what AI is going to do, extrapolating out what we're able to do now, and just taking the last 18 months of advancement and extrapolate it out the next 10 years. And you start to wonder about things. And what I was thinking around was David Hume. He was an English empiricist philosopher. He was Scottish, I think, but British. And he wrote some really interesting stuff on morals and on ethics. And sort of, if you condense down his idea on ethics, it was that it was a matter of taste or consequence. I'm going to judge the rightness or wrongness about this by how much I sort of like the outcome.
Yeah.
And believe me, I'm giving the like preschool version of it. It's been a long time. But at the root of it's kind of consequentialism. Mm-hmm. Which is exactly how you sort of look at the outcome of a computer program.
Yeah.
Like when we do QA testing in software development, we're testing to see if the outcome is exactly what we plan. We hypothesize, we test. This is what it is. It does not have an overarching ethic. And that's why I think we're going to evolve the conversation around AI to questions that are just not really they're not part of human culture right now.
Yeah.
Which is, what's the difference? The creative concept of humans, where we're able to, what's the phrase, you can want what you think, but you can't think what you want. You can't control that. Where does thought manifest from? And there's neuroscientists are way better and more qualified than me to talk about it. we can tell you, in theory, where even if we extrapolate it out 10 years, where AI's thoughts are going to come from. Where does human desire come from? What the Greeks would call eros, right? Where
Yeah.
does it, I don't mean it's just sexual desire. I mean like you want for anything.
Yeah.
It manifests in you, and you don't control whether you can control whether you act on it in theory if you believe in free will.
Yeah.
But you can't stop it from showing up. Well, the closest analog in AI as we can conceive of it now, that's going to be the outcome of an exercise in plagiarism. By that, I mean it's going to look at the sum total of every example of what people want
Yeah.
that I've ever seen. And I'm going to make a calculation based on the most likely, the best likelihood
Yeah.
of what you're asking me for in a prompt. That's how generative AI works now. So we think AI will get to the point where it can want for itself. I'm not sophisticated enough to understand how that manifests into being. It's the same way when we say, when we reach a singularity and it becomes self-aware.
Yeah.
Neuroscience is telling us right now, right, that the self we conceive of is a really complicated problem-solving evolutionary tool that primates have.
Yeah.
So what is an AI going to be aware of once it's self-aware? Is it going to evolve to the point that it can delude itself? I don't know the answer to that, but the point is the things that make us be able to manifest thought can, in my view, probably not come from the endpoint of a calculation. And whatever that means to society, however your children or your children's generation are going to look at the strict demarc between what is machine and what is human, it's going to become so much more important.
Yeah.
Culturally, like your cultural credibility is to like show how human you are. Then what is it? It's art.
Really? Because of the creative. That's interesting.
So AI art is not really art.
It's plagiarism.
It's plagiarism. To some degree, even if it's plagiarism of my prompts. So if I tell you, I have this in part of the talk that I give, really explicit prompts in this tool called Stable Diffusion that we use a lot. And then I give it some reference images. I say, make a white unicorn on a green hill with the blades of grass blowing in the breeze. And I'm going to have you make a small video, like or a GIF of this. And I'm going to give you 5 reference images of unicorns to train you on what a unicorn looks like. And then I'm going to give some negative prompts on stuff that I don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And it produces it. It could be a completely unique piece, meaning nobody's ever painted this before. It's not like you paint the Mona Lisa. It does exactly the Mona Lisa. But at the same time, it's not wholly original.
It's pulling pieces and parts from
and you're
other
telling
things
it what to do. Yeah, it's like a contractor.
That's really interesting because putting it in the human form, and we've done software development together, and I was on the ops side, you're on the development side. There's this constant push and pull between the two groups in that work line around what is a feature and what do we need to do. And I learned so much from you and the agile methodology of requirement planning. And when you keep saying prompt engineering or prompt into AI, it's almost the same to me. It needs to be so clear that what you're going in doesn't have an open-ended decision for AI to add in a little assertion or forget that, oh yeah, you got to do this first. And we can give some really good examples of what is the format for good requirement planning and what's an example of a bad requirement plan. And I like requirement planning in this model because it's not prompt yet, but it's no different. We're prompting developers to take an action and achieve a goal, and we're trying to give them as much information in the simplest, easiest to understand form so that there isn't a miss in communication, so that there isn't room for indecision, that the developer can go freewheel and say, oh, well, I understood it this way. It's really hard for humans to do that.
Well, I love this. This is a very interesting analogy because in good software development, let's say you have a very mature development team, and you not only write out a good set of requirements, user stories or something like this, but you also talk to them about the experience that you're trying to evoke on the outcome. From and this is my view, I'm sure there are people that disagree, but in my view, a really great product person is going to be able to sort of articulate that experience, but not the how. A lot of software development in the old days, especially, with like telling the developer exactly what you wanted them to do.
Yeah.
And then you had very immature developers who were like, tell me exactly what lines of code to change almost.
Yeah.
You know, that's not great. But the idea that through your pointing of the direction towards an experience, really creative and really mature developers are going to sort of unfold and manifest something that transcend the original requirements. Right now, AI is starting to do that a little bit with the prompts, where you give it a prompt and you can transcend it. But what you're not able to do, or I'm not able to do it very well, is I've got a picture in my head. And I use this example. When I first started playing with one of these tools, one of my favorite books, has like Space Knight in it. And I have a picture in my head of what this character looks like. I tried to see if I could get an AI image of this person. Impossible. I couldn't do it. I was so bummed about it.
Yeah.
But I produced some really cool images. So there's some serendipity in the use of generative AI, meaning you may not be able to get what exactly you want yet. And I'm not sure you'll be able to without some weird Neuralink thing in the future, right? Because human language is not precise enough. Human language is fraught with uncertainty. That's why
multiple meaning words,
not
context and grammar, and how it's delivered.
I could say, as a good Southern, bless your little heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I could mean...
It's a compliment.
Or it could be the absolute worst thing that, a matron in your church could say to you after you were acting up. So, did you ever see the 3-Body Problem on Netflix or read the book from the author in China? So, it's some really hard sci-fi. It's really, really good. I couldn't recommend it enough. I really thought it was great. And I listened to the audiobook of the original, not in Mandarin, it was translated. And it sets up a conflict between humanity and another species of sentient life a long way away, and constant surveillance. And they're way ahead of us in a whole lot of ways.
Yeah.
And humor. The context of jokes ended up being one of the best ways to communicate, because they could not understand what was being said. If you layered hidden meaning inside of a joke, they couldn't get it. So I think that this is some of the stuff, we're looking at with AI. To go back to your original question, what does this mean for the future generations here?
Yeah.
I think we're going to kind of balkanize into the areas that are uniquely human. Even with quantum computing, I think there's going to be facsimiles that are going to be compelling, but there will probably remain things that are uniquely human, and we will get more unique about those things. But
I hope they have more value, because the human creative should be more valuable in my mind, like as an artist, right?
I'm suspecting more. I'm talking about it more from a cultural standpoint, probably.
Okay.
Or
not the individual, but the culture.
Almost, like what do you get cultural credibility for being? The least machine-like person.
Yeah.
Because if you basically are just someone who gives guidance to an army of AIs, and that guidance is actually just giving them a compass heading, pretty soon you become almost less important, and the AIs are giving you recommendations and you're choosing one. And then eventually you're writing an algorithm where the AIs make recommendations, choose their own recommendation, and you just sort of watch. And then eventually you're not doing anything at all.
Well, we've watched that happen with OpenAI and ChatGPT to people that have tried to implement this as replacements to their sales messaging, as an example.
Right.
It's not a great tool yet for that, especially if you're not sophisticated in your prompting and in how you make it human. Now, if you wrote your own email, it's a really good email, it's ready to go, then you use AI to send it out or distribute it, that'd be a different use.
If you start and stop here, like if we froze in time here, AI tools are great, but they're not going to cause 90% of white-collar workers to lose their job, or people that work in the information business. But we already know, like at this exponential climb, any of the deductive reasoning that we do or inductive reasoning that we do is going to be able to be done faster and probably
more
better
accurately.
with more. If you could grok terabytes of data to make a decision that you're sort of basing on a little bit of data and a hunch, the people who are leveraging this are going to outcompete in the business world really, really quick. Is the stock market still going to be the same thing if it's predictable?
Well, look at what electronic trading did to the stock market.
100%.
This is the next forcing function that will keep people that can't afford the technology or the analyst into the technology from making that jump.
Mm-hmm.
It does not create a level playing field by any means. And it truly is fueled by capital and ambition, I guess.
So, I mean, there's productive and destructive. I mean, just like fire.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very similar. Like, people that are comparing this to some sort of Promethean event are not being overly dramatic. Fire is being given to humans from the gods, and it's another thing that our little brains are probably not ready to deal with. And right now it's controllable, but right now we have a tiger. We have a baby tiger living in our trailer house.
Yeah.
Or our apartment.
Yeah.
And it's
Small
fine.
space.
It's fine now. But when that thing is 800 pounds and hungry, it's not going to be okay.
So we've appropriately horrified everyone on what the future of AI can be.
Yeah.
I take it back to learning.
Mm-hmm.
And what we really have culturally is, how do we teach? How do we help people understand that risk, that threat? How do I help my 10-year-old distinguish that, yeah, this is the easy button for your homework right now, but no.
Well, how do you navigate and understand what is most likely true? I think is going to be the key, right? Because even if I worked for you and you had me performing some kind of analysis, financial, technological, whatever, ecological analysis, and I'm using a suite of AI tools that are giving me very plausible outcomes.
Yeah.
How do I test this? And what if I'm using AI tools to test the output of other AI tools? Okay, fine. Well, then from a learning standpoint, we're going to have to teach people not just facts, but facts are going to become important.
Yeah.
Like, in an AI-powered world, I almost wonder, I don't know, if the value of a liberal arts education is going to become more valuable again.
Because you've learned to question and
learned to think.
Yeah.
Right? In theory, like you've learned how to wrestle with the idea of what may be true, what comes from truth. I mean,
but this has been a question since Socrates. I mean,
well, not just that. Think about it this way: the Western natural sciences tradition that Newton, Darwin, all the way up to
scientific method,
all of it, but all of it's based on the notion of a pre-natural science revolution that came out of Christian theology, which was man's dominion over the earth. If you looked at like the idea of geoengineering and you talked to a Buddhist monk in the year 880 living in Thailand somewhere, that person would probably say to you, "What?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem reasonable to me at all. We want to be in harmony with nature." Okay, so you have this idea of dominion, and its output led to the birth, in some say, I mean, Nietzsche would say the death of its progenitor.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with Darwin, who for many people kills the former religious tradition.
Yep.
And we keep going, and we come up with AI. Does it repeat itself? Now, this is the fear that everybody has, right? That AI becomes something that kills us off. I doubt it. I doubt it like killing us physically.
Yeah.
But if we're no longer human because of the way we deal with information and we outsource that to another technology, then what's left?
Where's your value? Like, where's your free thinking? Where's your decision?
Where's your meaning?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that
Purpose.
If you gain meaning from doing math problems, and there are people who do that,
yep.
and that's fine. And we don't go back to a 2 and 3,000 year old idea that, we're all in the images of deity, and therefore that's where each person gets their own value.
Mm-hmm.
These are not fashionable ideas right now, and sure not in the AI circles, right? Yeah. Just because you're a human being, that ostensibly gives you value. You're about to let loose a whole constellation of other things that can do things humans can't, that are not human.
And if I'm a business owner with 10,000 employees, that means tons of risk that I never even considered.
Yes, but also tons of possibility. I mean, like I said, it's like fire, right?
So double-edged sword.
I think that the folks that are going to be reaping the biggest rewards from this, it sounds dramatic, but like this potential revolution, right, are ones that can harness the wave as it crests, like a surfer.
Mm-hmm.
You're catching that wave before it. When the wave breaks here, don't be there.
Yeah.
Right? We're probably going to have multiple waves that we're going to have to catch here as things peak and crash, because we're not elegant enough as a species to be able to just get this right the first time.
Yeah.
We're going to have to come up with new notions of economics. We're going to have to come up with, the Marxist ideas on labor don't exist today in some ways, right? Like the Industrial Revolution opened the idea for all of these new thoughts on economic theory. This is going to do the same thing. It's just, instead of somebody working in one of those really dangerous textile factories that'll pull your fingers off or whatever, instead of that, now it's in the area of the mind and what our cognition can do. So it can be frightening, especially when you see, as an old person like you,
yes,
older than me,
yes,
whatever, it's easy to sort of look at the generations that follow and cast judgment or anything like that.
Yeah.
But when you do see loneliness epidemics, when you see people basically becoming addicted to certain sorts of reward hormones based on interactions with technology, if you feed that into an algorithm, which we're already doing today, that can self-reinforce, it is worse than the worst kind of drug at a societal level.
The bullying capacity of AI is incredibly heartbreaking. And we've seen stories of it nationally.
So, just another piece of media, and it's already kind of old, but Joaquin Phoenix is in a movie called Her.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
No.
I would recommend it. He installs an AI operating system on his phone and talks to the voice of the AI is Scarlett Johansson.
Okay.
He talks to her through his earbud, and they have a romance, and she continues to evolve until she's doing 700 things at once while she's talking to him. And finally she has to leave him because he's an insect compared to her. And it's a metaphor, of course, but I can't recommend the film enough. It's just called Her. So.
But all the more reason to really talk to your employees, talk to your kids, talk to your community culture around how do we decide what's real, what's not? How do we implement AI as a part of our work or not? Mm-hmm. And then how do you educate against the emotion that AI can evoke? If you think it's a real person on the other side, there's a lot that can happen. And the media piece in my mind is a news story about a 13 or 14-year-old boy that just built a relationship with a computer.
Yeah.
And that's not far-fetched. We've had that concern for a long time. We've called it something else, and it's been people being malicious in the past. There's a football player that got catfished into this that's famous. But now it's the scammers that are calling your phone are getting more and more sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to find rooms where people are in that loneliness. They're in that place. They're looking for a dopamine hit in some way. And that's a security risk. That's a risk that makes them open to accepting this relationship with somebody they don't know. They're never going to meet this thing. But it starts to form a relationship. It starts to form influence over that person in a really big way that just really makes me nervous.
My bigger fear, Justin, is that we get to a spot where the person you're talking about doesn't even feel that they want that anymore. They don't make any sort of meaningful distinction between that dopamine hit when
a human interaction.
A beautiful girl talks to you and you get that flutter, that dopamine hit versus I'm interacting with technology in a way that is more predictable. Mm-hmm. And when I get my dopamine hit and zero risk.
Well, it's not going to reject me.
That's my point.
Until it does.
You don't, and then what?
Yeah.
Right?
You lose value and it goes a different way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I don't have a rubric that, a great, this is what you should do or this is what you should tell your boys, at this point yet, other than you are much better off knowing how AI is working in all of its different manifestations and tools than you are sort of disengaging from it and waiting 2-3 more years and then saying, now I really need to get into it because it's completely ubiquitous. It's kind of almost ubiquitous now.
Yeah.
But it gets to the point where now you're instead of walking the Appalachian Trail, which is no easy thing to do,
mm-hmm.
now you're walking up the AT, down the PT, across the ocean, and have to climb the Himalayas. It's going to be a much more challenging thing. And there's going to start to be concepts that manifest. It's just my prophecy. I can't.
Yeah.
Concepts that manifest that are outside of our current understanding. There are going to be words in the next 3 years that don't exist now that describe conditions that don't yet exist.
And I obviously don't even know the words that exist today. Like, you've introduced me to new ones in this conversation. I'll go back to it and we'll wrap up on the conversation of, I appreciate what Cofense is doing, and you're really getting it out to those large employee bases. You're on the edge, the bleeding edge of how do we use this for additional training? How do we use this for engagement in mm-hmm. our cultures, our communities, our workforces, wherever that might be? But where does our general audience go to learn about AI? Because I'm afraid a lot of them would go to AI to learn about AI.
And hilarious enough, I mean, a starting point for AI is, asking. This is what I would do. If you asked Gemini, on Google,
mm-hmm.
like, I would like to learn about generative art AI, and it would give you 6 or 7 recommendations.
Yeah.
And you start that 6 or 7. And the thing is, at this pace things are going right now, and I'm talking about things that are being commercially made. When I say obsolete,
yeah,
those things are almost commercially obsolete in a question of months.
Yeah.
We were at a conference. We were at DevLearn in November, and we went out there with some of our AI-derived content. And it wasn't humans wrote the content. We structured it, but we used tools to build it so that we could bring it to market much faster, much more efficiently. But these complex workflows that use a combination of 6 tools at once and a creator, nobody else that we saw worldwide was doing this yet.
Yeah.
And they're probably waiting until that's one tool in one person, right? But by that time, the landscape is going to change. So if you want to learn about this and you hear commercials on the radio, right?
Yeah.
About you need extra computing power to train your AI. And if you're working in finance, there's the whole AI piece there. If you're working in, computational mathematics, there are big AI pieces there. If you're working in art or learning or any type of content creation,
yeah,
it's a big step forward. If you're the type of writer who gets writer's block easy and can edit way better than they can write, AI can help you to still make something that's authentically yours, but they can get you over a hump.
Yeah.
It's sort of, like just a little bit of a shot. I don't want you to write the whole thing for me, but give me an idea on how to rewrite this paragraph because it's just not making any sense. These are just little helpers right now that can make a big, big difference and can maximize your potential. So that's what
a dangerous drug.
It's a dangerous drug because, I had a conversation with my boss today and I made some ridiculous comment like, if we started using this tool, I think we could publish 400 new titles this year.
He said, great.
And, there was more to it. But it's, at what point does the data output of AI augmentation start to get diminishing returns.
Yeah.
If I was publishing 1,000 versions of War and Peace, first of all, nobody would read them, right? But I mean, think about that. Like, what if they were absolute masterpieces, but they were giant novels?
Which one would
the
be
market,
real?
The market wouldn't bear it, right? Even if they were things that just like were completely amazing. One of my favorite books, and I talked about it recently, flopped when it was deployed. Blood Meridian, by Cormac McCarthy. Nobody really wanted to read it.
Yeah.
And then over time, there's a lot of people that think that's the best American novel that's ever been written. It's before its time. It was
they had to find it. The audience had to form, and so many
even
things.
McCarthy, before he died, said that there's not an audience for challenging books anymore.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
But anyway, my whole point is there will be a sort of a diminishing return from a market and capital standpoint.
Yeah.
But it's the people who are basically seizing the opportunity now to be able to stand on top of the hill to make a more clear determination when the next leap forward comes.
Yeah.
Because that I'm trying to think about where we want to be from a Cofense perspective when the next great leap in capability comes, and that we're ready to be right on that wave, on our surfboard, right?
Yeah.
And we want to bring our customers along with us. We want them to reap the benefits from what we're trying to do from a bleeding edge technology standpoint.
It's just a barrier. The barrier of entry for a company to go do this on their own is incredibly short-sighted. One, it'd be a huge investment, but two, your threat vectors. There's so many of them, and you pool those, and you can say, hey, globally, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing trends here, here, and here. And it's almost like you have to have that large of a data set to see these bad actors show themselves.
Well, it's almost like my hope is in the enterprise space, large enterprise, big company space, that have policies and procedures, that we're able to put things in place that actually can protect folks. Sort of like, how do you work on a nuclear reactor in a submarine? There's strict procedures, to keep you from getting fried, right? What worries me is the consumer side. The consumer side is a great opportunity because, my parents, I've drilled it into them. Look, do not give your social security number to anybody.
Don't text the bank.
They're not going to call you to ask for it. But the thing is, this is another aspect of the AI metered threat vectors, is if I can predict what you, Justin McKenzie, want with 98% clarity,
you're in control.
You're going to have to develop a level of mental fortitude in how you conduct yourself that is going to be incredibly difficult for a society that right now and for the last 50 years has really started to wane towards instant gratification.
Consumption.
Yep.
Where would people find you?
Well, Cofense.com is the best place to start. I'm also on LinkedIn. I am speaking at Intellicon here in Austin, or
Capital Factory.
On next Wednesday, the 19th, time of recording, and then I'll be in Florida, in Clearwater, Florida, at the Convene 2025 Cybersecurity Conference. That's going to be March. I speak on March 4th.
Okay.
There. So, also, if I'm pitching something, we are using some AI tools to create a new Formula One racing game.
Ooh, I like it.
So while you drive your race car on a time trial, you have to answer cybersecurity questions at the same time. It's sort of a level 5 level of learning.
Yeah.
And the faster you answer the question, the faster you can get back to driving, the faster you can get to the next question. And it's one of those things where I'm trying to use a completely different context to put you in the mental space of a busy workday, where you have divided attention.
The world's moving fast.
Exactly. Might as well have fun.
Lee, I always enjoy our conversations. I learn a new word every time. But I so appreciate that people like you are out here doing this work and really head on. How do we think about it as a large enterprise, as a community, as a family, as an individual?
Yeah.
These are challenging conversations. And if you're not talking about it, you're behind, because it is impacting your daily life as a consumer in some way already today. Maybe positive, maybe unseen, but it's out there. So go to Cofense. Go find those ways to learn and be curious about it.
Mhm.
A lot of people are intimidated by technology. Take a different stance. Just be curious. Ask questions and get involved with the movement towards it learning, because you're going to see this in your school districts. You're going to see it come out civically in your local politics. I hope we start to see policies on how to use, when to use, when not to use AI. So, Lee, thank you for the way you're building Texas. Thank you for spending the time with me today. And I'm going to go look up a lot of words.
It was a pleasure. I'm so glad to be here with you, and thanks for having me.